I keep going because I'm enjoying the practice now. And I'm a big, big believer in it's all about the practice. It's not about the product. And it's the practice that I'm enjoying so much.
Welcome to the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast. I'm Angela Nicholson, and I'm the founder of She Clicks, which is a community for female photographers. In these podcasts, I talk with women in the photographic industry to hear about their experiences, what drives them, and how they got to where they are now. This episode is with Jo Hoffman, who is best known for her multi-year ongoing project, Still, where every day for over a decade, she's made a photograph of found nature, no subject too small or too ordinary. Her book, Still, The Art of Noticing, which came out in May 2024, features 275 of her most stunning photographs, accompanied by essays with insights gained through this daily creative practice. Hi, Jo. Thank you for joining me today on the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast. It's really lovely to meet you, albeit remotely.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you. I'm talking to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, fantastic. I'm talking to you from South Oxfordshire in the UK. So I understand that you originally had a career as an aeronautical engineer and you switched to photography when the company you were working for changed hands. But why did you pick photography?
I had been an amateur photographer since college. So I had a college roommate. I was studying engineering in college. I probably in a different household would have grown up creative. You know, I had all those creative leanings. I was a maker. I made things. I did it all. I baked. I did needlepoint. But I mostly played outside in the woods. But I studied engineering in college, and a roommate of mine was an art student, and she would go out photographing on weekends. And so I started joining her on her Saturday afternoon drives. My undergraduate was at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. It's farm country, rolling hills, very, very beautiful. And I'd go with her on her Saturday afternoon drives, and I got hooked. I loved it. And so I was an amateur photographer for the next 20 years while I was a practicing aerospace research scientist.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah, very different. But I and mostly I was shooting like sort of landscape photography and taking the odd photo class. But when I left the corporate world in my 40s, I wanted to do one of these one-a-day projects that were so popular. And it made sense that I thought about doing a collage a day. I thought about doing a pattern a day. But it made sense that I would use the camera. That was what I was most skilled with. And so I thought up a one-a-day project that would keep me challenged and entertained, if you will. And the found nature on a simple background, one photo a day that I would share to the online community was how it started.
I think for a scientist, photography has quite a lot of appeal, doesn't it? Because it's that really nice mix of, yes, there is a lot of creativity involved. And really, if you're going to take great photos that people admire, you have to be a creative. But it's helpful if you understand the science behind it as well.
Yeah. I think, it is interesting. It's sort of, I think that, in another life, I may have been a good architect. It's that combination of the art with the science, and photography is similar. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right.
And when you started sort of taking your photography a bit more seriously, was it your intention for it to become your new career, or were you just looking for a creative outlet at that point?
Oh, it was absolutely just a creative outlet. I still had littles at home. We had a full life. My husband and I are self-employed. When I quit corporate work, he became the primary breadwinner, but it was all self-employed businesses, so I was helping out a lot. And I had partly left corporate America because I didn't like the acquiring company of my old beloved one. But I also wanted to be a hands-on mom. I wanted to be around. So I didn't want to add anything too ambitious that was going to, require me to go spend 3 hours a day in a studio or, be on location doing shoots or anything like that. So I crafted the project so that I could be around the house, be home when the kids were home. But it was really just to keep creatively limber. Honestly, I talk about it like I wanted creative calisthenics. Like I thought I would become an artist in retirement, right? That would be my my ambition. And until then, I was in my mid-40s. Until then, I would just do, I'd keep limber. I'd give myself these little challenges and keep active, keep pushing myself, keep trying to be creative until then. And then it blossomed into something much more than that, obviously.
Yeah. So why did you opt for a blog?
It's it's a funny thing. I didn't know what a blog was. So I was working corporate and blogs were around. They were a thing. I just was in a different world. I was living in a different world, and I didn't know what a blog was. And so it was 2010. I started to get this idea. I started my project January 1st, 2012, but I'd started to hear the word blog. I was curious about blogs. And then my husband's a writer, and he had started writing the same time I had started my one-a-day project. And I honestly thought, well, I'll play with a blog because I have more free time than you. But I was thinking it would be a good outlet for him. You know what I mean? Like for his writing. But, I'll experiment with it. I'll see if it makes sense. I'll just do this one-a-day project and see if this is a good outlet for you to get your writing seen. And that's how it started. Of course, I started a blog and then the blog got lots of attention. And here we are 12 and a half years later, and I haven't stopped. And it was a 1-year project. So, and he never did a blog. So it was the right fit for me. It was the perfect fit for me. And we never did one for him.
Because I think there's quite a big difference between sort of making a decision that you're going to take a photograph every day and saying you're going to write a blog about that photograph every day. That's quite a big step, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, I think, I guess. For me, I started out with the one-a-day project, and it was always I would make my photo, take my photo, edit it, and then post it. I never started out any other way. Instagram, I wasn't on Instagram when I started. If that had been, it was around, I wasn't using it. Had I been using it, I probably would have just posted to Instagram. It would have been easier, or whatever, more efficient, quicker. But I wasn't on it. And I just started with this blog, and I made sure the process, one of the reasons I'm doing this 12 and a half years later is I made sure that each step of that process was not too involved, right? It was really important. I could find my subject in the morning. I could let it sit on the kitchen counter until afternoon. I would photograph it sometime because I use natural light. I would photograph it sometime in the afternoon, edit it sometime, usually around dinner time, and something simmering on the cooktop, and I'm editing a photo, running back and forth, and then I post it to the blog in the evening. And each of those steps on a busy day can be as short as 2 minutes. I post the image to the blog and I write a little paragraph about what I found, why I chose that subject, or sometimes a little personal note about what's going on in my life. But mostly it's why I chose this subject, what is this subject, what interesting thing I learned about this subject. And on most days, I'd say I'd probably spend an hour, maybe an hour and a half, maybe an hour on the whole process. But there's days, like recently, my mom is 88. She was in the hospital. I do each of those steps in a minute. I pick a subject at the edge of the parking lot at the hospital. I bring it home. I photograph it very quickly, just a simple flat lay, just a single portrait. And then I, edit it very quickly. And then I upload it and just say, mom's in the hospital and this is all I got today. That's it. And that's my post. But that's the beauty of the one-a-day project is you get to do that. Not every day is going to be artful. Not every day is going to be a masterpiece assemblage of multiple pieces. Some days it's just a picture of the leaf from the edge of the parking lot.
Yeah.
But over the years, it adds up. It adds up and you get a bunch of really beautiful images. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Do you always take the photograph in your home or do you have a photograph in situ?
99% of the time it's at home. I have found that the wind outside, it's not necessarily the light that's a problem because you can always find a a shady spot or whatever, a nicely lit corner. But mostly it's the wind that is the problem outside for the kind of photography I'm doing. So I mostly photograph at home. There are times when I just can't.
Yeah.
If you look at my images, a lot of the winter stuff, it's, ice, frozen rain on branches. I can't bring those inside. They'll melt immediately. So a lot of the winter stuff, I have to go outside. Raindrops dripping off of cedar tips, that kind of stuff. I'm outside. But 90% of the time, I'm on my kitchen floor.
Okay. Sometimes the simpler pictures are actually the more difficult ones to create, particularly when there's, it's quite a minimalist subject and there's, you've got a clean white background. You've really got to nail everything. It's got to be exactly right for it to sort of pass muster, really.
Yes, that's, my aesthetic is very minimal. I do these assemblages, these flat lay assemblages because they're fun. Every now and then people like them. I like to do them to show a place. I was just in California and I came home and this morning I posted an assemblage of bits and pieces of California, and I came home with pockets full of seed pods and driftwood. And so I put that all together in a single image. But a lot of time I'm doing a single subject and I really like the very minimal, spare images. And it's my aesthetic, it's my personal aesthetic. I live in Minnesota. It's winter 5 months of the year here. I photograph bare branches, for 4 or 5 months. I don't get sick of them, but I assume that the people that follow my blog probably get pretty sick of bare branches. Winter's longer here in Minnesota than it is anywhere else in the north. And so anyway, I have an aesthetic that is very spare, but I try on the blog at least, and for my followers, I try to mix it up and have a variety of, some assemblages, some collections, some portraits, single subject portraits. I try to just keep it fresh, I say.
With the flat lays that you do, some of them are very complex, their layouts, very carefully considered. I was looking at one where you've got rows and rows of shells. And whilst that's not complicated in itself, they're all neatly arranged, actually it's really fiddly to produce that and make that really regular pattern. Is that something you would do in a day, or do you maybe just lay out a few each day and come, and then eventually when they're all laid out as you want, you come and take the photograph for that particular day and you do other photos during the week?
Yeah. Yeah. The shells, for example, depending, the round ones, like the auger shells, they roll in feathers. The tiniest of tiniest. I hold my breath when I work with the feathers, right? So yes, they are fiddly. Some of those compositions are very fiddly, and because they're so fiddly, I make them and photograph them immediately. Because if they laid around, I'm photographing on my kitchen floor because that's the best light in my house. I tried twice now over the 12 years to set up studios and keep coming back to my kitchen floor. So because it's a high traffic area, so I have to lay up the composition and then photograph it immediately. But I do have this really fun technique that I share when I teach workshops where I'll make a composition very gridded, very orderly, very lots of thought about negative space and all that. And I'll photograph it. And then I'll intentionally, I call it the hip bump, and I'll intentionally kick it or bump it and then photograph it again. And then decide later which composition I like better. And it's about 50-50. Sometimes I like the very, very intentional one, but sometimes I like the loose one that shows a little bit of order within the chaos of the hip bump, but there's still structure behind it. So it's about 50-50 whether I like the hip bump or the tightly structured one. So I often leave the subjects after my compositions on the kitchen floor, for a day or two, and then to see what happens, see how the flower wilts, or see how the assemblage gets disturbed by people walking by, and photograph it a second time, and then choose.
I can imagine that a dog would cause quite a bit of a disruption to some of your displays.
Oh yeah. I have this whole blog called Still started because I had a 2-year-old puggle that needed a walk.
Right.
And a puggle is a beagle pug mix, very neurotic, very, very affectionate, but neurotic breed. And he just did tremendously better if he got out for a walk every day. So the blog started because the dog needed a walk every day. And now that same dog is 15. But I have 15 years or 12 years of his nose in my images, right? He's always, I'm shooting above in a flat lay, and I've got my camera on a tripod, and I kick the camera and there's his nose or his paw. He used to be very, very, very interested in everything I brought in the house, but now he's 15. He mostly is indifferent.
Yeah.
But I actually miss those days of him sticking his nose in every third image. Yeah.
He's seen it all. He knows what you're doing now.
Yeah.
How would you say your projects evolved over the years, apart from your dog's nose not featuring quite so much?
It's an interesting thing. I started the blog, as I said, to do a one-a-day project for 1 year, and it was to give myself a creative challenge. And I wanted to work on, if you will, composition. Like the art of composition kind of eludes me. And I thought, well, I'll just compose, So I'm making images. I'm not taking images. I'm making compositions, and then I'm capturing them with a camera. And that's what I thought I was doing. It turns out 12 and a half years later, this daily practice has turned into essentially a mindfulness practice. I have to be present at least for part of every day to find my subject. And so I found that it's a really, really wonderful way to live, to be that present and that attentive to my environment. So it became a mindfulness practice. I got extremely knowledgeable about my bioregion, the plant and the flora and fauna of my area. I mean, every single day I'm looking for something new to photograph, and then I'm photographing it. When I post it in the evening, I'm, trying to find the Latin name and learning about it. And so I got, essentially became a citizen naturalist. One part of my book is this idea called 72 microseasons, where I mapped the seasonal unfolding of my place, my bioregion, into these 5-day increments called 72 microseasons. I'm really proud of that work. So I got very knowledgeable about my environment. I created this mindfulness practice that I really love and don't want to stop. But the composition, that hasn't changed much. It still is out of reach for me. I mean, I got techniques and tricks, right? And, I'm faster. I know if I'm going to do a curved branch that it has to be, and it will work better if it's a really nice sinuous curve. You know what I mean? Like I know, or if I'm going to do a composition grid of something that, and it's mostly straight lines, that the straighter they are, the better. I know I got techniques down, and as photographers, we all know like rule of thirds and all that kind of stuff. But I just thought I would get really a better handle on the art of composition. I have to say, I did get more confident about saying, I like this, or I don't like that, or saying, this is done. A lot of times when you're making those detailed assemblages, for me, they're done. When each time I add a new element, I disturb 2 or 3 more and the whole thing goes wonky. Then I have to be done.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's done. But sometimes I got faster, more confident at saying, nope, I'm stopping here. I'm going to stop here. This is done. So, but the irony is the composition, the art of composition, I don't feel like I've mastered it, which is what I set out to do. I've mastered all sorts of other things in this 12-year process, all life affirming, all life enhancing, but I did not master the art of composition, which I think is funny.
Does that help you keep going?
Yeah, I mean, it does, Honestly, I keep going partly because a practice now that I don't want to stop. It's just too, like I said, life affirming. So that's mostly why I keep going. But at this point, 12 and a half years, am I really going to get, understand composition anymore? Maybe, I don't know. I keep going because I'm enjoying the practice now. And I'm a big, big believer in it's all about the practice. It's not about the product. And it's the practice that I'm enjoying so much.
Yeah. If you go on holiday, do you take some of your, do you take a background with you? Do you take things with you so you can continue, or do you try and find stuff while you're away?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't work ahead. Well, I haven't historically worked ahead. I did, early on. So it was a 1-a-day project. And of course, it doesn't take very long, probably weeks, when you're asking yourself, well, what if I just do 3 photos in a day and then I have some margin, the rest of the week? What I found, and I think what a lot of people find, is it's harder to stop and start than it is to just do it every day.
Yeah.
And so I found that if I let myself off for a day, then it's even harder to pick it up, the next day. So I learned that early on. And so when I traveled, the project was designed, if you will, conceived so that I could do it when I travel. And, it's found nature on a white background, natural light, and shared to a blog. That's it. And the white background can be a white wall. It can be a white it's often my husband's white t-shirt. It can be a blank journal page. So it can be anywhere. And I have done it from anywhere. And for the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years of the blog, it traveled with me. Just recently, I started giving myself permission, if you will, to work ahead when I travel. So I was just in California last week for a 5-day book tour. It was incredibly packed, 2 events a day for 4 days. So I worked ahead and preloaded the blog and, explained to my followers, I'm in California. I worked ahead, here's a collection of something. And so that's become more recent. But for the first 8 years or so, I designed the project so that it could travel. And so I did it every day.
Do you ever regret your decisions with, for example, doing it every day or choosing a white background? Or are there any things you think, I wish I'd done it this way? Or if you felt quite comfortable in making changes?
Oh, that's a good question. So I committed to 1 year and I chose the white background. I have a white interior, white floors even. And so I can use the whole house as a studio. I can photograph in any bedroom under any window. I chose white on that first year, but I did spend 1 year doing black backgrounds, and I think I'm going to go back to that. I published a book in May with Fiden called Still the Art of Noticing, and it has some of my black images, but it was mostly my white images. And partly because of that book and that book being out there, I'm still doing the white, but I'm kind of itching to change it up and go back to black. So it's found nature, minimally manipulated, no man-made, no vases, no props, no string, no twine, minimally manipulated photographs. So it's just very spare presentations of found nature subjects. And I thought about, my first instinct was to do it on gray, but I wanted, when somebody visited the blog, I wanted it to be a seamless scroll. And it's really hard to make gray seamless, right? There's a gajillion shades of gray. And so that means each image would have a slightly different gray background. And I wanted it to be seamless. That's why the bright white or the pure black, because I wanted that seamless scroll. So my idea was that blog would be like this quiet corner of the internet, right? The internet was too loud, too jangly, too enervating. And I wanted to put a little quiet corner on the internet. And so so that seamless scroll of just pause, look at one thing, be still, seamless scroll. That was important to me at the time. And I still like it. So I'm going to go back to black. I play with different colored backgrounds for my subjects with different colored papers and stuff like that, but that's more sort of personal. This project is on a bright white or pure black background. Yeah.
white brings its own challenges, doesn't it? Because it has to be perfectly illuminated across the whole frame, because otherwise it will go to grey. And you can obviously adjust that in Photoshop, but again, that can be quite tricky to make sure that some areas don't look, just burned out, whereas others, maybe got a bit of texture.
Yeah, as any skilled or experienced photographer would know, if you've got a lot of high contrast, if you're doing a dark green leaf on a white background, that's easy to edit. But if the subject is light at all or has light colors, and white is obviously very tricky, and a lot of nature is white: shells, bones, tips of feathers, flowers. Those get really tricky, as does like the pale flax, like the washed out colors of dried grasses. That pale yellow kind of color, that is very hard to capture. And so I've developed over the years techniques. It's a funny thing. I should have probably at some point taken a Photoshop. I do everything in Photoshop. I should have taken some Photoshop classes. I never did. I just hunt and pecked and self-taught. But now I've got this technique where I can take almost any subject, even if it's a white on white subject, and be quite confident I can get a good image. And lately I've been teaching workshops, and everybody wants to know how I lift those backgrounds to bright white. And I was like, oh, it's very simple. It's very simple. And then I tried to teach it in workshops a couple times, and everybody afterwards was like kind of glazed over. And so I realized, so somebody said, can you write this down? So I said, sure, of course. It's very simple, And then I wrote it down, what I do. It was 4 pages of instructions.
Oh,
yeah, so it wasn't simple at all. It's just that I've been doing it for 12 years and I'm so fast at it. I mean, it does really only take me minutes to edit a photo, but it's a minutes of, click, 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 going really fast, right? So, but it's a lot of, to lift that background to bright white without blowing out the subject is a lot of making layers, adjusting one layer, collapsing it, duplicating, making another, adjusting that, collapsing it. It's just this really slow stepping up to the right background without blowing out the subject. So really that's where the time consuming part of it is.
And what about focusing?
I shoot on, I thoroughly appreciate being on this podcast and the community you've created, but the irony is I feel sometimes like I'm like not really a photographer. I'm using a camera to capture my creations. I mean, it's splitting hairs. I know it's splitting hairs. I just came out with a photo book. Anyway, I shoot at f/22. I started probably shooting at f/8, f/11, slowly inched up. Because my subjects don't wiggle and move, I can shoot at f/22. I found something about that f/22, it's not just the depth of field, because a lot of them are flat. I don't need that f/22, but there's something about the shutter being open that long that gives a little bit of softness. It's a funny thing with nature, because if you get too sharpened, it looks hyper realistic. And so I find I want the subject in focus, but I don't want it hyper sharpened so that it looks artificial. So it's a balance, but I shoot at f/22 and with the white background, a +1, anywhere between a +1 or +2 on the exposure. Always soft light. And if I don't have an overcast day, I use a diffuser to soften the light. And that's really my technique. In a Canon Mark IV D5 with a 50 millimeter lens on a simple tripod with a joystick that lets me, shoot at 90 degrees. And that's it. It's, my from the very beginning, I wanted the project to be low equipment, low tech, because I knew I was going to have to travel. It was going to have to travel with me. So I've always intentionally kept the equipment very, very minimal.
Yeah, good plan. I think sometimes when you start a new project, it's very easy to sort of fall into the trap of thinking, right, so I'll need to buy X, Y, and Z. And then you buy those and you start using those things. And they think, oh, now I'm going to need... And actually, sometimes it's just better to do what you can with what you've got and develop your projects around that.
Oh, yeah. I'm a huge fan of just enough equipment and no more. And so figure out exactly what you need and then stop. I mean, I've been doing this 12 years. I've gotten probably 100 DMs suggesting I use a light box, a soft box or whatever, or one of those backlighting table things. I've been suggested to use, because I'm shooting in my home, to use to connect, the camera to the computer, to hardwire it. I don't. I probably should have a remote shutter, just a simple remote shutter. I should have probably added that. I think that would help, and they're probably less than $100. But anyway, I didn't do any of it. I didn't do it. And I have this little cheap tripod, probably $100 tripod that I bought at the beginning of the project. And then this Christmas, I upgraded to like a $300 Manfrotto tripod that I thought would give me more reach, with the to go vertical over the subject. A little bit bigger, a little sturdier. It was going to give me more reach. I hate it. I haven't used it. It's sitting in the closet. It's too much tripod. It's like I'm wrestling with the tripod rather than, and a lot of times, so I'm back to my little cheapo that's barely held together, but I can maneuver it. It's light, it's easy. Because when I'm photographing, a flat lay is one thing. That's just a 90 degrees. But a lot of times I'm doing profile pictures and I'm trying at the moment decide am I going to be a little above, a little below, to the side, this side, and if the tripod requires a lot of manipulation, I just get frustrated. So I'm a big proponent of just enough equipment and no more.
Well, you spoke about it being a mindful process, and if you find that the kit is getting in your way and stopping that process being so mindful or so enjoyable for you, then it is the wrong thing, isn't it?
It's exactly right. So for me, there's 2 points in the day. There's one where I find my subject to photograph, which is being hyper present in my environment. That's the mindfulness. And then there's the part where I'm playing with the subject, trying to decide what is unique about it, what's different about it, what's fascinating about it. Or I'm in deep thought, trying to do a composition and, filling in all the little negative space and all that kind of stuff. Those for me, that's an opportunity to get into flow, when I'm in that mindset, which is different than the mindfulness it takes to find the subject in the first place. And so, yes, part of the reason I do this, part of the reason I love creativity is it is an on-ramp to flow. And I personally think flow is, it's like prayer or anything. It's an accessing of the sacred. And so it's a losing of the self. It's a letting go of the ego. So anyways, I don't want equipment getting in the way of that. Like I'm here because it doesn't happen every time, but it happens enough that I keep coming back. And so, yes, equipment can quickly get in the way of that.
I read somewhere that your family and friends and the community started bringing things along for you to photograph. Do you find it easier to connect with stuff that you found, or are you relatively comfortable with saying, oh, yes, that's, and making a photo with something that somebody else has provided?
Oh, no, I'm thrilled when people bring me stuff. A photo a day, every day for 12 and a half years. If you do the math, it's like 4,600 days. If people help me out for a day, I'm all in.
Okay.
Matter of fact, right before we started this podcast, literally minutes before we jumped on the podcast, my husband left the house to take the dog out so the dog wouldn't interrupt our interview. And he ran back in the house and he had a walking stick bug, about a 4-inch long bug on his hand. And he said, "Do you want this?" And it was alive. And I said, "Oh my God, yes." And I, drop everything. And I grabbed my camera and my tripod. So yeah, now, it's 10 o'clock in the morning in Minneapolis right now, and I have my photo for the day. So that's a gift. He brought me the walking bug. It's a gift. Yes. I'll take subjects from anyone after 12 and a half years. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing it on Instagram.
Yeah, it'll be tomorrow.
Do you ever have to say, but I photographed that. I photographed that before.
Well, I allow myself to re-photograph subjects.
Okay.
It would be 4,600. That would be too hard. It would even be at this point, 12 and a half years, too hard to even remember. I could. It's you know this. We all know this as photographers. I mean, that part of, I think, what draws a lot of us to photography is you are so present when you're making that image that you will always remember it, right? Like, it's a funny thing, like, whether it's a street photo or a landscape photo, or in my case, a found subject, I still, at 4,600 images, I can still tell you where I found most of those subjects. I mean, it's crazy. 4,600, and I can say, oh yeah, that was on that trail. I found that plant, that wildflower on that, on the Snail Lake Trail in August. It just because of the way that it makes you so present. So I could maybe remember most of the things I photographed, but I do allow myself to rephotograph. I especially love to rephotograph subjects like in different seasons, right? So I have this expression is an iris is an iris is an iris, is because when I give my workshops, I show the iris in winter, the iris in fall, in spring, the iris, which is, beautiful parrot-beaked bud, the iris in high summer, which is the blowsy lion's mane flower, and then the iris in fall, which has this gorgeous seed pod, absolutely gorgeous seed pod, and then again in winter. So I especially like to revisit subjects. And my point is, those are all iris. They're all iris. We only think of iris as the one in peak bloom, but they're all iris. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really good time to go to 6 from She Clicks. I've got 10 questions from She Clickers, and I'd like you to answer 6 of them, please, by picking numbers from 1 to 10. So, could I have your first number, please?
Sure, 7.
7, right. When you started your daily posting, did you have an end date in mind? That was Mary Ann. So actually, you did mention that it was going to be a year's project. So maybe we need to twist that and say, what made you continue after the year?
Yeah, I did. I started as a 1-year project. And for these one-a-day projects, anyone thinking about doing them, they're so powerful. I think 100 days is the minimum. You can see 30-day challenges online. I think that's too short. I think 100 days is a minimum. I committed to a year. What happened is, at the end of the year, 2 things. I had gotten some press for the project, and the press, I had gotten contacted by Martha Stewart Living magazine to do a feature, and the feature was going to come out the following July. So it was going to be a year, after my 1-year project stopped. So I felt a little compelled to keep going. But also I found out that I was really enjoying it. It was all these secondary benefits that I hadn't thought about, of mindfulness, placefulness, learning about my bioregion. All of that I was finding just really exciting. And so I just wanted to keep going. And then I just kept going. And in my mind, I recommit every year to 1 more year. And I asked myself at the end of, and sometime in December, am I going to keep going? So that it's just how I think. I commit 1 year at a time. And at this point, I think I'm going to just keep going.
Okay. Can I have your second number then, please?
Number 4.
Where does your appreciation for the beauty in dead animals come from? And that question is from Liz.
Oh, I do a lot of roadkill. And it kind of goes back to that. An iris is an iris is an iris. The iris in winter, the dying back flowers in fall, the desiccated, leaves in November. I just find them every bit as beautiful. Honestly, at this point, after 12 and a half years, I'm finding them more beautiful, more interesting than the subjects in full expression, especially the flowers. Maybe it's just that because the full bloom flowers are so ubiquitous, I don't know. But I'm finding the dying back plants to be far more interesting to photograph than the full bloom. Roadkill, it's what I have access to. And I just still think it's beautiful, right? It's so beautiful. I'm not a wildlife photographer. Again, I love nature, but I never wanted to get that much equipment. It's a equipment heavy practice. And so that's why roadkill. But I find them still as beautiful sometimes. I'm not photographing the smashed or bloody parts. I'm photographing the parts that still look whole or intact. But I just find them as beautiful as the living subjects.
So can I have your third number then, please?
And number 2.
How do you make a choice on a day with an abundance of possible subjects? That question's from Paula.
Oh, really good question, Paula. In high season, so take August. I live in the upper Midwest of the North American continent. It's fertile, fertile, fertile. This is the time of abundance. It's the time of ripening. It's the time time of growth. It can be decision overwhelm, easily be decision overwhelm. And so honestly, I tell people I live in the North where 5 months a year, it's mostly a carpet of white and, bare branches. I tell people that January is easier for me than July because July has so much choice. And so I find even after 12 and a half years, I get overwhelmed in July. So, that I develop tricks and techniques. I go out and because there's so much to choose from, I have to say, okay, I'm just going to look for berries, or I'm just going to look for stem colors, or I'm just going to look for tendrils, or I'm just going to look for the color purple. So I do this, I call it spotlight, filters, where I go out, I take my walk, and I'm only looking for one thing. Otherwise, there's just too much noise. I have the opposite problem, obviously, in winter. But yeah, July and August are particularly hard months. It's just too much. I taught a workshop in California recently, and it happened to be springtime in California. And I just said to the folks, it would take me several months to adjust to the abundance and variety of nature you have here. It was like it's decision fatigue. But yeah, it can be tricky. But so I give myself these spotlighting tricks so I can essentially, zoom in on just a little something and kind of quiet down all the other noise.
I think that's a good approach. So could I have your fourth number, please?
1.
Number 1. I love the huge range in your photographic work. Sorry, I think I'm melting. I'll read this again. I love the huge range in your photographic work. I wondered who you were inspired by, as I recognise hints of Hockney and Mondrian, or is this just me putting my own slant on your images? That question is from Penny.
Good question, Penny. If you look at a photographer named Karl with a K, Karl Blossfeldt, are you familiar with him, Angela?
I actually went to an exhibition of his just recently.
So I saw his work probably 4 or 5 years before I started my project. And I remember seeing it for the first time and my mouth fell open. And I think he was probably the single biggest influence on me. Now I look for influence everywhere, and I don't look at other found nature photographers on Instagram. I literally try not to follow them, but I try to go adjacent. So like Mondrian would be, if you look at some of my assemblages, you for sure would see Mondrian. And that's like a good example, but my original inspiration was Karl Blossfeldt. And the thing I like about Karl Blossfeldt is he's now, he's in the MoMA, he's probably at the Tate Modern. He's considered fine art, but when he was making those images 100 years ago, which that blows my mind, he was making them as educational tools so that the students in the sculpture department would have real nature subjects to design from, and so he was just simply making educational tools for an art school. And now 100 years later, are considered fine art, which I love that too. It's sort of the humble beginnings and then the later recognition, something, because, quite frankly, if you look at my work, is it, is it craft? Is it art? Is it fine art? Is it, what is it? Is it even photography? I'm using a camera to capture the compositions. People get hung up on that. I don't get hung up on it so much. It's sort of, I like it. That's all that matters to me. But people do. I have shown my work to professional photographers and gotten comments like, this will never be considered fine art. Those kind of things send chills up my spine. I didn't start out the project trying to make fine art, but I love that Karl Blossfeldt didn't either. And now it's very much considered fine art. So anyway, Karl Blossfeldt, look him up. You'll see the similarity.
I love these little connections. So we had a SheClicks meetup at a small museum a few weeks ago to see an exhibition of his work. So it's amazing that we've formed that connection today.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so could I have your penultimate number, please?
Number 5.
I love the clarity and lightness of the photographs when using a light or white background. But have you ever thought about doing shoots using a more natural setup in the field rather than at home? And that question's from Maribel.
Yeah, I have, as we mentioned. There's a lot of artists doing that. Some that do there's a guy in California who does these things he calls them morning altars, where he takes a morning walk and he makes a composition, photographs it, on the trail, photographs it, shares it to Instagram, and then leaves it to blow in the wind. You know what I mean? It won't be there. It's maybe another person or two will find it, but nobody else after that. And so I love that idea. Yeah, like I said, I kind of explained it. I picked the white because I wanted the seamless scroll on the blog. And as soon as you depart from pure white or true black, you get the, image. You get the edges of the image. And some people, honestly, that's one thing professional photographers told me. You can't have images floating on white. You need a frame. They need a frame. And I was like, why are there so many rules? I just wanted to photograph on nature on a white background. And so anyways, I just did me, and this is how it came out. And I've seen a lot of what she's talking about, doing it in the field, or doing it on a picnic table, or doing it on a sidewalk. I love those. I think they're great. I especially like the weathered, cracked sidewalks. Personally, I like the gray backgrounds, but I wanted something else when I started out. And I like what I've created, the body work I created.
Which is the most important thing. It's your work, so you're the one who should like it and appreciate it the most.
Right.
But clearly a lot of other people do, so well done. Okay, so your last number then, please.
3.
Number 3, I read your amateur photographer article where you talk about enough. Do you have any parallel projects which you're taking further? For example, an arranged collection of objects found over a period of time? That question's from Paula.
Hi, Paula. I started this project when I had kids at home, school-age kids. My youngest just went to college, and so I'm now an empty nester. So I'm going to be adding some kind of project. I do think I want to continue this project still. And like I said, I've done it for 12 and a half years. I'm quite efficient at it now. I kind of, the idea of being like the crazy lady who makes 20,000 images in a row kind of interests me. So I'm going to keep doing it. But with my son going off to college, I'm an empty nester. So I think I'm going to add a new creative practice. And I haven't decided what that is yet. I launched a book on May 1st, and my husband launched a book on July 9th. And so we've been on book tour together, and that's taking up all my time. And we've committed to doing that through the end of this calendar year, through the end of 2024. And then, so next year it will be time for me to start a new practice. And I haven't decided where I'm going to go. I like all the visual arts. I like to dabble with paint. I love mark making, and I really like collage. Essentially what I do is collage with nature bits. So this would just be collage with paper bits, I guess. So maybe too similar. Anyways, I'm going to start a new practice here soon because I have now more time in my day. It's on the horizon, but it's a good question.
That's very exciting. Very exciting. Now that you've got a book, has that sort of changed your perspective slightly? So will you be thinking about your next practice that could be a book as well? Do you see that as an outcome?
No, that's That's a great question. So I started this as a personal practice. It evolved into more than that. It got traction. It got visibility. I fully understand that was chance. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you make your own luck. Yes, I've been making 1 image a day every day for 12 and a half years. So you can say I made my own luck. But the probability, the possibility of that happening a second time, of me picking a project that kind of tapped into some kind of zeitgeist, the calm, Zen-like compositions, people clearly needed those at the time. The possibility that I could repeat something like that and get the same kind of traction, I just don't, personally, I don't expect that to happen twice. Feels like lightning striking twice. So no, I'm not going to pick my next project with a book in mind. My projects tend to be more, I know myself well enough that if I'm doing them because I enjoy them, and if that's not the reason I'm doing them, then I won't keep doing it, right? And so I will pick a project based on, what I find interesting, what will challenge me, which will keep me excited, interested, where I can continue to grow and learn. And then if it gets traction, I will be really fun, because I do have to say that the publishing a book was really fun. I got so lucky with my publisher, and every step of it has been fun. And so I would love to do that again, really love to, but I don't expect it to happen twice, because it felt like a gift, a little bit of a gift.
Oh, well, I'm excited to see what you start producing next year.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
Well, Mary Jo, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been absolutely delightful speaking with you.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Angela. I'm super impressed by the community you've created. It's really beautiful, and I'm honored to be invited in for this discussion. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for listening to this episode of the She Clicks Women in Photography podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Special thanks to everybody who sent in a question. You'll find links to Mary Jo's website and social media channels in the show notes. I'll be back with another episode soon, so please subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform and tell all your friends and followers about it. You'll also find She Clicks on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube if you search for She Clicks Net. So until next time, enjoy your photography.